Okay, in the next hour, we'll be going through what the WASH Severity Classification, or WSC, is. We'll start with where it came from, what the problem is that we're trying to address, what it means in practice, and how we are rolling it out. And secondly, we'll cover the implementation plan. So what's been done so far and what are the next steps, as well as give you an overview of the governance structure and the structure of the WSC team. We'll leave room for questions and answers at the end, but if you have any questions, please do post them in the chat box or raise your hand. So the idea of the WSC came from this realization that there is a great effort of working towards a very strong intersectoral analysis that can identify needs across sectors and key drivers of severity. But at the same time, the underlying WASH sectoral analysis has often not been as strong as it would need to be and hasn't been particularly standardized or consistent in approaches. So while, for example, the food security sector are using the integrated phase classification system to classify food needs, which is seen as its gold standard in terms of severity analysis, there has been no such similar process within the WASH sector. And so despite growing wealth of data in the WASH sector over the past years, WASH analysis has been rather ad hoc. It's been done country by country and with limited consistency in terms of approach or quality. And without a standardized system to transform data into more clear decision-making processes, it's very challenging to accurately identify needs and to plan the response. And it's also more difficult to get key interventions funded properly, which can turn into this cyclical problem of underfunded WASH interventions. As you will see, the WSC as a process is essentially trying to act as a filter. So to bring this wealth of data into an organized format and process it in a rigorous fashion to produce manageable results. So these challenges that I just mentioned haven't been identified just a part of our theorizing, but came out as part of the WSC inception phase research, where we conducted a series of interviews with different key WASH stakeholders at global level, and they were asked questions around what they thought about the idea of a standardized WASH analysis system. And some of the responses were things like a standardized analysis system is essential to inform WASH response, that there is a need to produce results that everyone can have confidence in, ensuring actors are equipped to focus on where the most severe needs are is very crucial, and it would be important in order to support with early response and warning. And perhaps the most interesting one is the comment that whenever there's a drought, we always end up talking about food security and never WASH, which I think most of us can have experience with. So these are really the main issues that we are trying to tackle with the WSC. So the WASH severity classification is then what we're proposing as the solution to this problem. So now what is it really? It can be described as three things. It's a process to build evidence-based technical consensus among key WASH stakeholders. It's a recognized interagency set of tools and protocols to classify the severity and drivers of WASH needs and vulnerabilities based on established standards. So it's not a process led and implemented by only one actor, but rather it's a group of WASH stakeholders coming together and recognizing an approach and coming up with a standardized system and analyzing this together. It's also a process to support decision makers by ensuring a rigorous analysis of WASH conditions by consolidating a wide range of evidence. And the two bottom points are really essential, as it's about having this consensus-based approach, which is also backed up by a strong and tested methodology. So related to these challenges described, the WSC has three key strategic objectives in order to improve the WASH response. And firstly, it aims to improve it through improved strategic targeting and prioritization within and across crises by producing comparable results. It also feeds the needs monitoring and early warning systems to inform preparedness and monitor key risk factors and to anticipate severity before it occurs. And finally, it's about creating a more robust evidence base for advocacy so there can be better and increased funding for the WASH sector. So how then does it achieve these strategic objectives? So the WSC tries to do so by classifying different areas in a country into different severity phases over space and over time. It is also set up to allow for cross-country comparisons that are not fully possible currently in the sectoral or intersectoral HNOs. So we can then start to understand better the magnitude, the duration and drivers of severity for specific areas or population groups, and to understand the number of people in need in various severity phases. So who is in need, how many are in need, where are they, and what types of needs do they have? You will then be able to draw comparisons over time and across countries to inform strategic decision for advocacy and to ground a global allocation of resources based on evidence. And on the map to the right here, we have an example where you can see the severity classification by province, and the below graph would then illustrate the change in severity and number of people over a period of 10 years. So these are types of outputs that will be produced by the analysis as we implement. So then how does this work in practice? We can see the WSC almost as a funnel where we bring together actors and WASH data. We train the actors in a specific way of analyzing the data and have their inputs to also improve the process. Then we apply this method in an analysis workshop, and we classify the severity of WASH conditions in a consensus-based manner together in this workshop. We'll then share the results in a very clear and digestible format through the maps, fact sheets, or small reports. And these will be shared with the broader partner and donor community. So we're trying to avoid just pumping endless tables and figures into the atmosphere, but coming up with products that are easy to understand and use without losing the granularity of the data and analysis. So to clarify, the WSC is not a data collection tool per se, and there's not one specific data set or survey that needs to feed into it, but rather it's a consensus-based analytical process where we're using existing data from different sources. And the added value of the WSC in the long term would be that it can be used to kind of harmonize WASH data collection methodologies and approaches as we start to implement it in more context, and the response is more used to then what type of data are needed. In the terms of data sources so far that can be applied, some examples would be the mix, MSNAs, WASH-specific assessments, smart surveys, groundwater monitoring, government data, and so on. So the methodology in short, and we can go into this more in the Q&A if needed, but it starts by defining a WASH insecurity score, which is based on a few core indicators covering water, sanitation, and hygiene. And then based on the composition of those indicators, we'll get a preliminary score of percentage of households in each severity category, which ranges from 1 to 5. And the following steps and analytical modules will then incorporate additional data to investigate to what extent the WASH insecurity score really reflect those other aspects or needs. So for example, we'll be looking at public health outcomes, which could include nutrition data, data on WASH-related diseases, safety and security, and mortality. And in terms of socioeconomic changes, we'll include data on livelihood change, coping mechanisms, and displacement. And we'll also include information on WASH systems and services, as well as households' access to WASH services, and the quality and reliability of those services. And finally, we're incorporating any other factor that can contribute to the WASH situation. For example, climate and environment, disabilities, conflict, or natural hazards, and so on. And this approach is meant to give more of a holistic view of WASH conditions and not just use sector-specific indicators that we normally refer to. We then compare those additional factors with the initial WASH insecurity score and decide based on a certain criteria if the insecurity score should be adjusted. Once this is done, then we classify the area using the 20% rule, which can be interpreted as it's the most severe phase that affects at least 20% of households in a given area. So there was a brief overview of what the WSC is and the process that's been developed so far. And in terms of implementation plan, as you see here, we are currently just entered phase 2. In phase 1, we developed the analytical framework and analysis protocols and piloted in 2 countries, Afghanistan and Burkina Faso. And we then also released the first version of the WSC technical guidance document, which is the core manual outlining the whole process, and which will be used by the analysis team in terms of training and reference document. And in phase 2, so this year, we're conducting a feasibility study of the process, including interviews with key stakeholders. And we're planning for an academic review as well of the process that we have developed so far. This year, we'll also be conducting full implementations in 5 countries. That means response on nationwide analysis in country using the joint analysis workshop as described before. And light implementations in 15 countries where we have the WSC core team are analyzing existing data and using the analysis protocols, but without this in-country analysis workshop. Following these 20 implementations in 2021, we'll improve and upgrade the approach, which will lead to the implementation handbook version 2 that should then be released by the end of this year. And finally, in phase 3, starting early 2022, there will be full implementations of the WSC in the top 20 HPC countries, followed by a full evaluation up to that point at the end of 2022. In terms of the governance structure, as an interagency and consensus-based initiative, we've set up a multi-stakeholder governance structure to ensure that we can get the diversity of views and priorities to the development process. And there is a shared ownership of the process. It's not owned or mandated by one organization, but based on the needs and inputs of many actors. So firstly, we have the WSC development team, which is currently consisting of 3 full-time staff from Impact to Reach, with technical support from a few other people, including myself and a consultant with long experience of WASH. And to support the development team, we have 3 governing bodies that you can see at the bottom here. We have the steering committee to provide a more strategic overview, which currently also consists of the actors in the box there to the left. And we have a technical advisory group to provide and advise and give validation from more technical point of view. And finally, this year, we'll be launching the WSC community, which will be open to all interested partners and allow them to be regularly updated on progress and to provide inputs as well. And finally, to mention that in November 2020, the WSC project as a whole was endorsed by the IASC. In terms of the current analysis team structure, we have the global development team, as I just mentioned, who are leading on collating and preparing data for the analysis during the implementation, providing training of lead analysts in country and drafting of the information products. We then have the country advisory team, which consists of UNICEF and REACH country teams, government actors, WASH cluster, sector, and SAG. And this group will more support overall coordination and logistics of the actual implementation, but it will also be reviewing and validating the analysis findings. And for each state level analysis, there will be a team of analysts who are participating in the analysis processes. And these will be facilitated by one lead analyst who's been trained on the process. So that's it in terms of the current structure. Eventually, we want this to be run more by country teams, with the development team providing more of this technical advice and guidance on how to run it and how to implement it. As we have with the IPC, for example, once you've been through this process, you're expanding the pool of knowledge of people who know how to do it. So we're trying to just increase that the pool of people who have experience with the WSC before we can start making it a more country-run process. And that is pretty much what we had here. And I will be opening the floor to questions and answers, and also introducing you to Augusto, who is on the call, and he's the brain, I would say, to this to the WSC, and he can also give some additional feedback and input in case you have any questions. So should we? Are there any questions in the chat box, maybe?
Yes, Rebecka, there are some initial questions in the chat box. Hello, my name is Augusto. Nice to meet you. I know several among you. So the first question, Rebecka, is about it's about how all this classification compares to GMP, and then yes, and then there are a few sub questions on this. Perhaps if I can start answering these questions, then feel free to add. I think that there are three main differences, in fact, between this WASH severity classification and the GMP. The first one is that GMP looks, I mean, it's very geared towards development first, and then it looks exclusively at the classification only in terms of coverage of WASH services, right? So you know there are the three ladders, and they really focus on whether households have access to improved water, improved sanitation, etc. Well, the approach here is, as in the IPC for food security, it's a bit broader on the one hand, and also it has a strong focus on public health. Rebecka, do we have a slide here on the analytical framework?
Yes, let me put that up.
Yeah. So if you look here at the right, on top of our pyramid, we have public health. So mortality, nutrition, water-related diseases, and then obviously we are looking at coverage of WASH services, especially from a household perspective. You see here at the second level where we put household outcomes, but also on more socioeconomic dimensions, right? Which is very important to understand the vulnerability of people. Then we zoom out, and from the house perspective, we go to the community or area level, where we look more at systems and services, including market and stuff like this. And then at the contributing factors, where we look at the impact or the event or the shocks that cause the situation, but also more broadly speaking on vulnerabilities and on the context, including stuff like meteorological data, environmental data, legal services, how the WASH governance works, etc. So So yeah, the first main difference is this one. The second main difference is on the analytical process. So the GMP is basically a methodology that does this classification purely on a data-driven basis, right? So analyzing a handful of indicators, and there is no joint analysis process that is involved, right? While as the IPC here, we have both a core data model that it's used to do the initial projections, but then the final classification is done jointly through analysis workshops with WASH practitioners in each country. And this is very important because as the IPC, one of the key objectives here is, yes, obviously having very solid evidence, but also producing this joint understanding of the situation so that WASH partners in countries have the ownership of this understanding and can act upon these by using the findings in order to inform their strategic planning. I would perhaps stop here on this question, but Brian and Rachel, feel free to jump in if you want to elaborate on this.
Otherwise, there's another question. So who are from KIT, who are the WASH actors and how are they related to decision makers, both in agencies about where they might direct resources and in the HNO and RRPs?
So typically, the WASH actors we're talking about are, well, at the country level, the analysis process is really structured around the cluster. So the cluster coordinator in the countries where we have piloting it and where we are now preparing for the implementation is really at the center of the process because we felt this was exactly the platform that we needed for this, right? So the cluster is the sum of all WASH actors that are present there, including government officials, right? So relevant line ministries, national and international NGOs that are participating in the response, UN agencies that are participating in the WASH response, and then also donors if they follow those coordination if they're engaging coordination platforms, and private sector actors, because often sometimes in the cluster you have also private sector actors in there. So those are the big classic, if you want. Yeah. Then Rebecka, can you?
Yes, next from Alyosha, any thoughts on how the WC would influence humanitarian needs overviews and joint intersectoral analysis, or the GF?
So on the humanitarian needs overview, so you know that as you know, the IPC is used by the food security cluster to inform its HNO. We hope that this will be the case also for the WASH Severity Classification. Once you know the system is quite new, and we need to some time to apply it, generate lessons learned, adjust. But I hope that one day when it's gonna be really ready to go, we could do the same. Still, this has not been designed specifically for the HNO like the IPC, right? You can use the WASH Severity Classification also for other things. And also other clusters, not just the WASH cluster, could use the results of the WASH Severity Classification if relevant, right? As other clusters use the IPC results. On the intersectorial analysis, broadly speaking, we believe that strong intersectoral analysis really is key for sectoral analysis, but also the other way around, right? So if all sectors have very strong systems like the IPC in place, then it's very easy to do a synthesis of this. And we contribute, and we hope to contribute also to intersectoral analysis. So with the WASH Severity Classification, as the IPC does.
Two more questions from Rachel and Reza. What are the 5 pilot countries? And from the pilot, or the 5 countries, I guess, implementing this year. And from our pilot project, what were the main challenges?
Yeah, so the pilot countries. So we have for this year, because obviously it's a process that requires work, right? So for this year, which is the first year where we really do a large-scale implementation, the 5 countries so far that have been identified are Honduras, Guatemala, Iraq, Niger, Nigeria, and South Sudan. So in those 5 countries, we are gonna deploy the full process. So basically running the analysis through this joint analysis workshop as the IPC does. But because we wanted to really generate as much as lessons learned as possible from as many countries as possible, we are gonna also apply the protocols to additional 15 countries, but with a FuseNet approach, if you are familiar with this. What does it mean? FuseNet use the IPC protocols to do the IPC analysis, but only done through a pool of experts, global experts in a sense, right? So without all the joint analysis in country, which is obviously a key part, but it's also the heaviest one. So obviously, if you have this approach, the consensus building side is not there anymore. So it's not the ideal approach we would recommend, but for really research and development purposes, we really want to apply at least once the protocols to as many countries as possible, so that we can then do further research and development for to improve the analysis protocols.
Sorry. And then on the main challenges that we faced in the pilot projects, I can maybe start and I go so you can jump in. I think as everyone have experienced in the past year, we had to run these fully remotely, which I think is always a bit of a challenge to really get that engagement that you need from stakeholders, and also to coordinate. And with a new project like this, it requires a bit more than to get the buy-in. But in the end, I think it did actually go really well, and I think we will learn that technical skills to do that properly. And maybe also another thing is to identify initially and collate all the relevant data sources that are there, and to have this kind of engagement with the partners that we're engaging with to identify and collate everything. But after, it also worked out well. Do you want to add something?
One challenge is, I mean, the first 2 pilots were very interesting in the sense that, I mean, at our biggest, so basically we were super glad because we tested. I mean, we worked this out not in a lab, but almost, right. We were not alone, but on the contrary, we have a development team, a technical advisory group with several main WASH actors in there. So, but no matter how many brains you have around the table, and no matter how confident you are that the system makes sense, then obviously, the ground testing is a very delicate step. And overall, the protocols, the logical flow worked, the calibration worked. The challenge is, it's in my view, is really building the capacity building aspect. Because obviously, I mean, for the IPC, it took like 10 years to build the capacity of food security people that are not data people. So building their capacity in analysis, but also to build the technical knowledge of data people in food security, right? And we anticipate that this will be a long process for us as well. So the training component becomes critical.
Yes, I agree to that. Another question from Kit: for locations that are clusterized and perhaps in long-term crisis and are used to humanitarian architecture, I think we can see some easy-ish wins, but in other locations, the governance of the WC is going to be as critical as having developed a fabulous tool. Yes, definitely. I think, yeah. Augusto, you want to comment?
On this, yes. So it's true that when we have humanitarian architecture, things are more straightforward because, thanks God, there is the cluster, and it's again, in our view, the perfect platform at country level where to nest these kind of processes. For other contexts, we are now running a consultancy that specifically looks at the governance system of the WASH Severity Classification, both at global level and at country level, because as an interagency process, the governance aspect is obviously very, very important. For a country level, we have got in touch with several key informants to map a bit out the options we have, but it's, and also in terms of the relation with the government, where to nest the whole thing in those kind of contexts. And we think that by early June we could have initial thoughts. The other good thing is that some of the implementation countries this year are gonna be development countries. And so, this will provide also an opportunity to test the WASH Severity Classification from a governance perspective in those kind of contexts. Obviously, we anticipate that there will be a usual cycle of lessons learned and adjustments for this as well.
Now we have two comments on questions on the data sources. Are there any specific data coming directly from affected communities? And secondly, we'll reference data sources that are not always updated every year, but efficacy of classification review will be yearly, and how will we manage this? And although it's not a data collection process, will there be triangulation done at field level?
Do you wanna go first?
So, I mean, definitely there are data sources that are coming directly from affected communities, either through household surveys or any other forms of direct engagement with affected communities. So that's definitely used in addition to more infrastructural assessments or any of the other, yeah. So in that way, definitely data from affected communities is being used. Sorry, what was the other question?
It's about the frequency and the refresh, like.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that is always a problem, that we have certain data sources that are much less frequent than the analysis that we're doing. also sometimes for the HNO and the intersectoral analysis. And it will be a matter of, we're also referring to and using different data sources, and hopefully they will in some way add up or complement each other. And in the long run as well, there's hope that, you can kind of adjust or align data collection according to the WASH process as well. So, if this is coming, we can also make sure that there are some data collection processes that are in line with the timeline. Do you want to add?
Perhaps that also that yes, indeed. I mean, if there is no new data collection, it would be impossible to or useless to run the analysis process again, right? But often, the situation is that you'll have some data sources that will be updated, other that will not be updated. So it's realistically speaking, often it's going to be a mix of the two. The additional thing I would like to add here is that yes, this is not at all a data collection process, but it could be also a good way for advocating, the need to fill data gaps in a certain countries, right? And also pushing actors that are not, WASH or in charge of WASH data collections to collect data more regularly. Obviously, for instance, if we don't have updated public health indicators, it would be really challenging to run this process, right? Because as you can see, this is at the very top of our pyramid. So we hope that, as the IPC has done for the food security section, this will also help this kind of advocacy, which is needed in many contexts, even though in others we see more and more data that is available.
Two more questions here. How do we ensure that the workshops in different countries or in different moments in time ensure comparable analytical results?
Right. So on this one, there are two major ways to ensure comparability, right? So on the one hand, there is this the core data model that Rebecka outlined during the presentation, and this is applied everywhere at the data preparation stage, right? So the analysts, the participants in the workshop will have already this data pre-processed according to globally agreed standards. The other thing is that that it's very important to ensure comparability is that all the different phases or severity phases are benchmarked against globally agreed thresholds, right? That would be applied in all countries. Now, can these thresholds be contextualized in certain countries? So far the answer has been yes, as far as it's not just for this analysis process that we are adjusting the thresholds. For instance, in certain countries, the standard 20 liters per person per day as a key threshold has been adapted because it didn't match the reality, right? But it has been adjusted in an official way, and it means by all the partners of the clusters, right, agreeing on adjusting those standards to the context. In these cases, I think it's perfectly fine to englobate these updated thresholds or contextualized thresholds. What would not be in our view okay is tweaking just the threshold for the analysis purpose, while we keep saying that having less than 20 liters per person per day is a key threshold that differentiates a person in need versus a person not in need. The other way to really standardize the process is the protocols themselves, so that that will guide the analysis process, and based on which the participants will be trained, right? This is obviously very important, so that the protocols are applied in the right way in each of the contexts.
Yes. Final question so far. The tool is focusing on rating of locations as small administrative units like districts. Is it possible to use it for prioritizing one point over another if they are in the same administrative location?
I mean, the short answer here is that you can classify as granularly as the data is available, right? You could even classify household by household, in fact, if you have this, like, obviously it doesn't make sense, and it's just an example that I'm giving you. But as far as you have the data that is available for specific communities, you could potentially run this exercise to prioritize communities. But overall, indeed, the focus here is a bit more zoomed out. So technically, you could use those protocols for differentiated communities. But I would think that there are easiest way to pick a community versus another.
Yeah, and also it would require a lot of manpower if you were to do that in like at the village level, for example, across the whole country. It would be take a lot of time running these joint workshops for each location as well.
No, sure, but perhaps if you have 10 locations only.
Yeah. No, definitely.
But theoretically, yes, you could use it. But then yes, the geographical scope of your analysis should be limited. Otherwise, it's an infinite process.
I don't see any more questions in the chat. Does anyone have any other comments or questions? No.
Feel free also to just unmute yourself and jump in if you feel like to share something with the group.
Exactly. Oh. What have you seen as factors that differentiate between locations? I think maybe at this point it's a bit too early to say. We just run 2 pilots, but hopefully we'll have a more clear idea of that by the end of this year, even before actually, when we've done full implementations in more countries. But very interesting question, and it will be interesting to see. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, the main differences are driven by public health outcomes, right? And also access to basic WASH services. So yeah, this is so far this has been the driving factors for the differentiations. But it's true that so far we have piloted this only in a few provinces in Burkina Faso and Afghanistan, and therefore it's a bit premature to draw these kind of conclusions.
Any final chance to raise a question? Monica, please. Do you want to speak?
Yeah, I never forgot how to raise my hand. Hi, everyone, on all these different forums and platforms. So thanks so much, and thanks to all the participants here today. I just really wanted to give a big thank you on the behalf of the Global WASH Cluster and UNICEF to the team at REACH, as well as the I know you have quite a few people working on the WSC development team, and it's really been a great effort to see all of this come together. This year is going to be a very big push. So this is my plea to all the partners that are on the call in the countries where Augusto and Rebecca have covered, where we'll be rolling out the 20 implementations between the full and the light. Please do get involved. We're mobilizing country offices, we're mobilizing regional offices from the UNICEF colleagues, and we really want to put our full force behind this. We see this as a really, really game-changing tool for the sector, one that will benefit the way that we work together and the way we move forward. So really, it's my plea, I guess, my advocacy for support, because I think we all have a role to play in this. So we're committed very much. We've been providing financial support, technical support, as well as coordination support, but we also welcome others that would like to get involved in whatever way, in whatever form you can. So please, if you are interested, I don't know, Rebecca, Augusto, are we putting contact details at the end? I know there's a website. Please do reach out, please do get involved. And as the colleagues have already touched upon, as the information products come out and are available from the various implementations that we're doing this year, we will be disseminating those broadly. So please do get in touch if this has been of interest to you today. And again, a big thanks to Augusto, Rebecca, Will, and the rest of the team behind the development of the WASH Severity Classification. Really well done. Thanks, that's all.
Thank you a lot, Monica. I think these are quite good words maybe to end on. We'll share out the PowerPoints, and we'll make sure that we also add contact details to the team. So in case you have any questions, you can just reach out. Yes, and Augusto also put his email in the chat box.
Thank you very much for being
Thank you so
being
much
with us today.